Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of highly specialized sources and turn the most intricate details into instant, actionable knowledge. Today, we're undertaking a deep dive into an area of culinary mastery that, well, it demands extreme technical precision. We're looking at breadfruit preservation, a practice our sources really liken to an art form less like just cooking and maybe more like mastering complex engineering.
That's exactly right. Our mission today is a really rigorous instructional deep dive. We're looking at 22 highly specific, technically demanding breadfruit preserves. This is pure precision work. We aren't interested in approximations. We are focused entirely on the specifics, things like the exact measurements, the necessary sequential steps, and crucially understanding the technical philosophy behind them. We're really analyzing the difference between a successful transformation and what the source calls a texture failure.
Right. We're charting the journey from, a simple starchy fruit to these really intricate flavor sculptures.
Mhm.
We need to understand the sequential control required, what the source refers to as charting the valley folds of slow cooking and mountain folds of fermentation. This deep dive is for you, the learner, to gain mastery not just by intuition, but by following these precise instructions.
Yeah, this is a direct look into the Master's Workshop philosophy. If we're to achieve preservation mastery, we have to understand the sequential creasing and the layered folding, the really precise details that make these preserves actually work. We are focusing on going over each and every single detail, making sure you understand the instructional mandate here. Exactness equals excellence.
Okay, let's unpack this foundational philosophy then. It sets an immediate expectation that preservation is, well, almost a scientific discipline. The sources insist on patience, mathematical precision, deliberate steps, treating the ingredients like selecting the finest paper for a really intricate project. What stands out to you about this commitment to exactness?
Well, what's fascinating is the almost um, military commitment to exact science over just intuition. This practice demands that you approach the breadfruit not just as a fruit, but as the ideal canvas. Breadfruit is pretty unparalleled because of its neutral starch and its really mild flavor. Unlike fruits with strong flavors, it doesn't compete with the aromatics or the spices or the fats. It actually absorbs and amplifies them. It really is the perfect foundational starch that can be completely transformed by something as bold as, say, duck fat or as subtle as macroot lime.
And the level of detail provided by these Master's Workshop sources is truly obsessive. I notice they don't just give us the steps and ingredients, they include the exact caloric count for every single preserve per serving, and often for the base ingredients themselves. Why go to that level of meticulous documentation?
Well, it underlines the principle of total control, doesn't it? Listing the exact caloric content per serving, down to the contribution of almost negligible ingredients, it emphasizes that this preservation method is an exercise in total accountability and documentation. It establishes the central rule of this practice. If you want perfection, you need that mathematical precision right from the start. Documentation is absolutely part of the process. For the rest of this deep dive, we'll probably skip repeating the exact calorie count for every item, but just know this level of measurement is inherent in every single instruction we cover.
Understood. Yeah, let's definitely remember that meticulousness as we move into the actual techniques. Okay, let's start with preserves that demand high technique and really serious flavor depth, bridging that sweet and savory gap. We begin with the breadfruit roasted red pepper acar, the Phoenix Rising.
This is a phenomenal example. Using aggressive technique, high heat, specifically for a refined and surprisingly subtle outcome. The foundational materials include cubed and blanched breadfruit, roasted red bell peppers, and those crucial spices like panchphoron, which, for the listener who might not be familiar, literally translates to Bengali five-spice. It's usually a mixture of fennel, cumin, fenugreek, nigella, and mustard seeds.
And the instructions are rigorous. The sequential creasing starts with the knife work, cubing the breadfruit into uniform pieces and blanching them for exactly 8 minutes until just tender. Why is that uniformity and precise blanching time so critical here?
Well, if your cubes are uneven, you just get inconsistent results. Simple as that. The 8 minutes of blanching sets the outer starch layer. It ensures that when the breadfruit is preserved, it absorbs the oil and spices evenly without turning into, mush. The density has to be consistent. But the real mastery is in the pepper preparation. You char the red peppers over an open flame until they're completely blistered, then you steam them in a sealed container for precisely 15 minutes before peeling. That steam time is absolutely vital. It uses residual heat to soften the flesh without degrading those sweet, smoky notes you got during the charring.
Okay. And then the oil treatment. The mustard oil must be heated to the smoking point before the panchphoron seeds are dropped to crackle and bloom. Why must we reach the smoking point first? What happens if we add the spices too soon?
Right, that initial harsh heat is required to remove the sharp, sort of acrid compounds that are inherent in raw mustard oil. It fundamentally transforms it into a clean, smooth preservation medium. If you add the panch-phoron before the oil smokes, the seeds will cook unevenly. They'll release their aromatics too slowly, or worse, they might even burn. That creates a bitter, muddy flavor profile. Heating the oil correctly ensures the seeds release their oils immediately and fully. That's the crackling and blooming, establishing the vibrant base for the turmeric and those smoky red peppers.
Ah, okay. That attention to oil preparation makes perfect sense. Next, let's look at the depth of the breadfruit fermented black garlic chutney, the shadow box. This seems to rely heavily on layering and aging.
It really demands what the source calls the patience of layered folding. We use roasted breadfruit, fermented black garlic, aged sherry vinegar, and date syrup. You absolutely must first roast the breadfruit chunks at a high 425 degrees for 35 minutes until those crucial caramelized edges form. You're building flavor dimensionally, layer by layer.
And what happens if I try to speed up that 25-minute caramelization process for the onions required in this recipe?
Yeah.
That sounds like a big time commitment just for an onion.
Yeah, it sounds like it, but the source is adamant. Shortcuts result in poor flavor depth, period. Caramelizing a large sweet onion with disciplined, low and slow heat control for 25 minutes until it's deep amber creates complex Maillard reactions. This depth just cannot be achieved through rapid sautéing. It results in a rich, malty sweetness that is essential to balance the aged sherry vinegar and that intense umami of the black garlic. The black garlic itself, mashed into a paste, offers this molasses-like sweetness and savory depth that really elevate this preserve from just a simple chutney to a true umami sculpture.
Okay, I see. Finally, in this section, we have the technique of pure luxury, breadfruit duck fat confit, the golden crane. This preserve demands extreme temperature control.
Yes, this is a masterclass in rendering and infusion. The luxury paper selection, as they call it, requires rendered duck fat, fresh thyme, bay leaves, smashed garlic, and orange peel. And the critical instruction is absolutely non-negotiable. You must heat the duck fat to precisely 180 degrees Fahrenheit.
Why 180 degrees specifically? If I let the temperature drift up to, say, 195 degrees Fahrenheit, what specific texture failure am I inviting?
Good question. If you hit 195 degrees air, you risk pushing the technique past confit and into basically a very slow fry. 180 degrees Fahrenheit is critical because it's high enough to fully render the fat and infuse the herb and citrus notes, but it's low enough to prevent the rapid breakdown of the breadfruit starch. If the temperature gets too high, the breadfruit can absorb too much fat or the starch matrix breaks down too quickly. That results in a mushy, oil-logged product, exactly the texture failures like creased paper the source warns against. The required slow cooking process, 75 minutes at that exact temperature, ensures the starch transforms into that silky preservation texture.
Right, silky preservation. Got it. Moving now to lighter, more aromatic profiles that demand gentleness and attention to subtle flavors. We start with the breadfruit coconut milk compote, the lotus blossom.
Okay, the key here is maintaining structural integrity while using powerful, but importantly, non-acidic aromatics. The breadfruit is sliced into thin, crescents-like, delicate paper petals, as the source describes, and poached very gently. The base is coconut milk infused with Southeast Asian aromatics.
Can you elaborate on those aromatics? They seem specifically chosen to avoid acidity, as you said.
Absolutely. We use macroot lime leaves, which deliver an intense citrus fragrance without adding any acidity, bruised lemongrass for a bright lemony fragrance, and thin-sliced galangal. Galangal is often confused with ginger, but it provides a much more subtle, almost piney heat that is far more delicate. The gentle unfolding part is a 20-minute poaching time, ensuring the breadfruit becomes tender but still maintains its shape perfectly. The cooking liquid itself, saturated with these aromatics, actually becomes the preservation medium, so that infused flavor is central to the whole technique.
Interesting. The next preserve is all about transformation. Breadfruit coconut dulce, the tropical butterfly. This sounds like a slow development of caramelization.
It is. It's a study in precise sugar transformation. We use breadfruit puree, coconut cream, and coconut sugar. The beautiful transformation involves slowly cooking the cream and sugar for about 45 minutes until the golden transformation begins. This slow cooking creates a deep, multi-layered caramelization from the coconut sugar that's just far more complex than you'd get from standard white sugar.
And what about the rum? The instruction mandates adding aged rum off heat after the thickening stage. Why off heat?
That instruction is vital for flavor retention. If you add the rum while the mixture is still boiling, the volatile alcohol and a lot of the complex flavor esters will just evaporate immediately, poof, Adding it off heat ensures the alcohol flavor is retained, resulting in a product that is completely transformed, yet recognizably breadfruit, carrying that sophisticated boozy note.
Makes sense. Finally, let's discuss one of the most structurally complex. The breadfruit banana leaf leather, the flexible foundation. This 60-calorie preserve requires hours of reduction. Wow.
Yeah, this is a true flexible art form built on concentration. It uses concentrated breadfruit puree and ripe plantain. The first step is the concentration itself, reducing the puree slowly for 2 to 3 hours. This is like, as the source puts it, pressing paper pulp into a dense, flavor-packed sheet.
Why such a long reduction time, though? Can't I just use a thicker puree to start?
Well, if you start with a thick but still watery puree, the resulting leather will tend to crack and crumble during dehydration. That's because the moisture content is too high and it's unevenly distributed. The 2-3 hour reduction is necessary to concentrate the natural starches and sugars. It creates a stable, flavor-dense foundation that can withstand the subsequent low-temperature drying process. After that initial reduction, the mixture is wrapped in banana leaves and steamed briefly, which sets the initial pliable texture. Then the preservation is achieved via low-temperature dehydration 135 degrees Fahrenheit for 18 to 24 hours until it's fully pliable. The banana leaf imparts subtle, earthy notes during this whole process.
Okay, quite the process. We shift now to high-intensity flavors, starting with controlled fermentation. The breadfruit kimchi brine ferment. The living paper sounds like a dynamic process driven by microbial activity.
It really is. This preserve relies on creating the perfect, controlled environment for existing bacterial cultures from the kimchi brine. We use active kimchi brine, Korean chili flakes, gochugaru, garlic, ginger, and fish sauce. After chunking and blanching the breadfruit for 5 minutes, we hit the critical preparatory step, tossing the blanched breadfruit with salt and letting it drain for 2 hours.
2 hours? That seems like an eternity for simple draining. What is the technical function of removing that excess moisture before fermentation?
It's absolutely vital, both for safety and for the final flavor profile. Breadfruit has a surprisingly high water content. If you introduce that undrained water into the ferment, it dilutes the existing acidic kimchi brine. That dilution raises the overall pH, which slows the rate of fermentation, increases the risk of undesirable mold or bacterial growth, and results in a less concentrated, less tangy final product. Draining concentrates the breadfruit starch and ensures the established culture in the existing brine can jumpstart the fermentation immediately. This leads to a safer, tastier product after the 5 to 7 days required for transformation.
Right, safety and flavor. Got it. Next, the ultimate challenge in controlled heat. Breadfruit Scotch bonnet jam. The fire crane. The source warns of the extreme precision required here.
Oh, this demands total respect for the capsaicin. Total respect. The instruction is explicit. You must carefully seed and mince only 1 Scotch bonnet pepper for a batch of this size. This isn't about being tentative, it's about mathematical heat control, precision.
So if I add even half a pepper more, I essentially ruin the balance, correct?
Precisely. Too much capsaicin will just overwhelm the entire flavor profile. It turns it from a complex preserve into, well, a searing challenge. The controlled burn process involves cooking the breadfruit with brown sugar until a jammy consistency is developed. The pepper is folded in near the end. The acidity from the lime juice and apple cider vinegar is the crucial counterpoint. It balances the intense heat and the sweetness of the brown sugar. It ensures the heat builds gradually and harmoniously, not just yum.
Gradually and harmoniously. Okay. Finally, we encounter the complex balance of the breadfruit horseradish mostarda, the sharp fold. For listeners, can you quickly define what a mostarda is?
Sure. A mostarda is traditionally an Italian condiment. It typically features preserved fruit and a syrup infused with mustard. This gives it a characteristic sweet, sharp, and hot profile all at once. For this breadfruit version, we use uniform cubes, white wine vinegar, prepared horseradish, and 2 forms of mustard whole seeds in powder.
And the source insists on a balance of sweet, sharp, and hot elements with mathematical precision. How does the horseradish contribute to the sharp fold?
The horseradish provides that immediate, volatile, sharp heat that cuts through the breadfruit's mild starch like precise knife work, as the source puts it. The challenge is integrating the prepared horseradish and the mustard seeds into the traditional foundation syrup, the sugar and vinegar, without the heat dissipating too quickly or unevenly. The final product must have structural integrity, which means that the sweet, the sharp, and the hot elements need to hit the palate sequentially, but also simultaneously. It's a true test of balancing powerful flavor vectors.
Sequentially but simultaneously. Tricky. Now we enter the realm of modern technical mastery using gelling agents and clarified liquids. Let's start with the extreme clarity required for the breadfruit agar crystalline paste. the geometric precision.
Yes, this is essentially edible geometry. It relies entirely on visual and textual purity. We must use breadfruit juice, not puree. That's critical. The crystallization process mandates multiple straining through progressively finer meshes.
Why the fanaticism over clear juice? If I skip one of those straining steps, what's the risk?
The risk is a cloudy final product, which just ruins the crystalline effect entirely. Even tiny residual starch or pulp particles will cause visual turbidity, making it look murky. This is why the juice is strained through multiple stages, often ended with cheesecloth or even a laboratory-grade filter to achieve the purest, clearest base possible. Think of it like preparing the purest form of paper pulp for high-quality paper. The clear juice is heated to dissolve the agar completely, along with the yuzu juice, that intense floral Japanese citrus, and a touch of sake for complexity. It's then poured into precise geometric mold for setting.
The level of control needed here is just incredible. Next, we have another gelling technique, breadfruit hibiscus jelly, the ruby blossom. This focuses on natural pectin activation.
Right, this utilizes the blooming crystallization technique. We brew the hibiscus tea strong as determination, love that phrasing for that deep ruby color, then combine it with breadfruit cooking liquid, which provides some natural pectin. But the most technically defining step follows. Once the premium pectin and sugar are added, the mixture must be brought to a rolling boil for exactly 1 minute.
Exactly 60 seconds of rolling boil. That sounds like a terrifyingly tight window. Why is that specific timing mandatory?
It is tight. It's the precise activation window for both commercial and natural pectin. Pectin requires intense heat and sugar to set correctly, but if you boil it for only, say, 30 seconds, it likely won't set firmly. If you boil it for 90 seconds, the pectin actually begins to degrade, resulting in a runny, weak jelly. That 1 minute of intense rolling boil ensures the perfect structural set, the ruby blossom integrity.
Okay, 1 minute it is. Our final technical creation in this section is the breadfruit espresso reduction, the caffeinated crane. This one is about amplification through concentration.
Yes, the awakening process demands serious patience here. We use the repurposed breadfruit cooking liquid, that clear, starchy liquid we mentioned, and reduce it for a full 60 minutes until it's highly concentrated. This liquid provides a natural, subtle sweetness and thickening power. Strong espresso and brown sugar are added, and the reduction continues until a syrup consistency is achieved. The depth of the coffee is specifically chosen here to amplify the breadfruit's subtle earthiness, creating a deep, sophisticated flavor profile that relies entirely on hours of slow evaporation.
Hours of slow evaporation. Okay, let's look at the preserves that challenge expectations now, blending traditions, starting with the breadfruit miso curd, the Zen garden. Miso and egg curd is certainly a fusion approach.
It absolutely is. This mindful process marries the savory depth of Japanese fermentation, using white miso with classic French patisserie technique. The breadfruit must be steamed and pureed until it's silky smooth. The miso is whisked with mirin until fully dissolved. The clarity of the miso flavor depends on total dissolution, no lumps.
And the challenge of making a perfect curd usually comes down to heat control with the egg yolks, right?
Precisely. Whisking the egg yolks requires constant attention and extremely gentle heat. You absolutely cannot rush this process. The heat must be controlled meticulously to prevent the yolks from scrambling or seizing up. The technique is successful when the mixture coats the back of a spoon like silk, which signifies that the eggs have emulsified perfectly with the fat and starch. This allows the miso's umami and the breadfruit's mild sweetness to harmonize in this really luxurious texture.
Luxurious indeed. Next, the breadfruit pickled watermelon rind conserve, the surprise package. This combination of crunchy, tangy, and soft ingredients sounds, well, almost impossible to harmonize.
It sounds impossible, but it's the revelation unfold, as the source calls it. It relies on combining disparate textures that actually support each other in the end. You have the soft, diced breadfruit, but you must combine it with tangy, chopped, pickled watermelon rind, which provides a crucial, non-negotiable crunch and acidity. Concentrated sweetness comes from dried figs, and a sort of Mediterranean sophistication from toasted pine nuts. The key is that the tanginess of the rind and the concentration of the figs act as the mortar, biting the softness of the breadfruit and the nuttiness of the pine nuts into a surprising harmony.
Harmony from unlikely partners. Okay, let's discuss the ultimate in resourcefulness, breadfruit fish sauce reduction, the umami crane. This uses the starchy water from cooking the breadfruit itself.
Yes, this is the concentrated folding principle. In action waste nothing, not even the cooking water. The starchy cooking water is reduced slowly with fish sauce, palm sugar, tamarind, and aromatics for about 45 minutes until it's syrupy. The breadfruit starch acts as the natural thickener here, completely replacing the need for gelling agents. The reduction concentrates that complex sweet, salty, sour balance that really defines a lot of Southeast Asian cuisine. If you stop the reduction too early, the flavor will be thin and just salty. If you go too long, it can become bitter. It must coat the spoon like liquid silk to be perfect. Liquid silk, got it. And finally, the ultimate commitment in this instructional manual, breadfruit sage vinegar, the final fold, requiring months of patience. This truly represents mastery completion. It utilizes the principle of fermenting breadfruit scraps in cooking water, the ultimate repurposing. This process is highly complex because it's actually two-phase. The initial fermentation takes 7 to 10 days just to create a low-alcohol base. Then, the vinegar mother, the Acetobacter culture, is introduced for the final acidic transformation, which requires 12 to 16 weeks of what the source calls seasonal patience. This long duration allows the sage to infuse deeply and the acetic acid to develop fully, resulting in a complex, shelf-stable acidic preserve. It's the long game.
Wow, 12 to 16 weeks. Okay, now that we've covered these 22 incredibly demanding techniques, let's look at the core instructional knowledge, the principles and equipment necessary for the learner to actually achieve mastery. What are the mandatory essential folding tools for anyone attempting this level of preservation?
Right, precision begins with the equipment. You absolutely must have sharp knives for consistent cutting, fine mesh strainers for achieving clarity in liquids, like we discussed with the agar paste, and dedicated fermentation vessels with proper airflow. But beyond these, the technical requirements demand digital scales for mathematical precision. Measuring ingredients by weight, not volume, is completely non-negotiable in these instructions. And you need pH testing supplies for safely monitoring the acidity of ferments and preserves. You have to measure and control the environment. It's critical.
Yeah, and I appreciate that documentation is listed as a mandatory step in the way of careful preparation. It's not just about doing it, but recording it.
It's absolutely crucial for success and, importantly, replication. Mandatory steps include sterilizing all equipment. A pristine workspace prevents spoilage, full stop. And labeling every single jar with dates and contents. Why? Because, as the source implies, masters must document their variables. You need to monitor temperatures and timing religiously. If your jam fails to set or your fermentation develops mold, your notes on temperature drift or pH levels are the only way to troubleshoot and learn for next time.
Makes sense. It seems like time management is also framed differently here, categorized by the level of patience required under seasonal practice scheduling.
That's right. And it's important to remember that not everything takes 16 weeks. The techniques are sort of categorized by commitment level. Quick techniques, like the compote or simple reductions, are ready in maybe 1 to 3 hours for immediate satisfaction. Traditional preserves, like the confit, require more like a half-day commitment for proper development and infusion. Then you have fermentation projects like the kimchi, demanding weeks of controlled activity. And finally, the master-level techniques like that sage vinegar demand the longest investment, that seasonal patience needing 12 to 16 weeks for that final, truly irreplaceable result.
Okay. And what about the resource philosophy, the foundation of how we treat the ingredients themselves?
It centers entirely on quality and sustainability. The instructional material emphasizes that breadfruit must be used at peak ripeness. That's when its starch content is exactly right to support the preservation process properly. And the core principle of waste nothing is key throughout. The cooking liquid, scraps, peels, everything has potential, as we saw with the umami cream reduction using starchy water. Finally, the learner must understand that investment in quality ingredients and precision equipment is essential. You really must honor the time and skill invested in preservation with the best tools you can possibly get.
What an incredible technical journey we've been on. We've gone from meticulously blanching breadfruit for exactly 8 minutes and heating mustard oil to its precise smoking point, all the way to brewing vinegar over 4 months. It really illustrates the scientific depth hidden within this, well, seemingly simple fruit.
Absolutely. And the takeaway should be clear. These are not just recipes in the casual sense. They are specific instructional exercises in patience, precision, and understanding ingredient transformation. Whether you're using agar for crystalline structure or carefully controlling the duck fat temperature at exactly 180 degrees of Roletin, the success relies entirely on exactness and controlled timing. That ensures the final preserved product is truly, as the source says, museum quality.
That attention to technical detail is absolutely the single most important takeaway here. The source material mentions detailed notes are kept for teaching others the principles learned. So our provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over this week is this. Using the master's principles of precision as your guide, What mundane ingredient in your own kitchen could you apply the Zen garden principle, that silky smooth, constant attention technique, or maybe the golden crane principle, that precise, low temperature, slow cooking, to transform into something unexpected this week?
Think about the precision, think about the process, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.